Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. When you're first considering where you're putting your things, it's all about composition, figuring out where things go. So with the side of your pencil, you want to just say, okay, I want her head somewhere towards the top, and you can make yourself a little mark there. That just gives you, where you're going to put everything up at the top. And you can say, well, I want her elbow somewhere down in here. I want to leave myself a little bit of space, just in case, too, that maybe your object needs to go a little bit bigger. Then you have that latitude, you have that room. Then you start comparing sizes to sizes. When you look at your picture, how much space is her head take up? Is it this much? Is it this much? How much space does that head take up? Sometimes I'll even take my fingers and do something like this and go, okay, if her head's right here, does that leave me enough space? And I can measure her head to the rest of her body. And so I can say, well, her chin maybe is going to be about right there. And so if I just go ahead and do kind of a little egg shape or a little oval, little rounded area and just say, okay, that's about her head, right up in there somewhere. Then she's got, a neck and shoulders are going to be about down in here somewhere. I can put those shoulders in. Her arm is going to be kind of tilted. About like this. She's got a big poofy sleeve. You can even put in that poofy sleeve. Arm will come over here. And it's stick figures, okay? Think stick figures. Don't be too, there's no detail here. I'm just figuring out where things go. Her other arm is kind of hidden back behind her torso. But yet, about where her hand comes out right here, there's her hand, is where her other arm kind of shows, and then you have her hand down in there. So you've got some basic shapes. It's kind of almost like stick figures, but we're just figuring out where everything goes. If this is her ear right here, then right straight down from her ear, there's a muscle that comes right off your ear. It's called the sternocleidoid mastoid. And it comes down and meets up with your clavicle right there between your clavicles, which are your collarbones. And I know it's kind of weird, but whenever I draw humans, I'm always thinking anatomy. And so I'll list the bones and muscles in my brain, just so I get them all in the right place and doing the right thing. Kind of hard to see where her figure is because of the dress, the sleeves at least. But you just start making simple shapes, figuring out where everything kind of goes. I'm not worried about fingers, just right now, basic construction of the body. I can even throw in the hair. And if it's not right, I can change it from here. But I have to draw something in to get my point of reference, or else, how do you know where to put stuff? Then I'll erase whatever I need to erase. The most important thing here is probably her head, her face. So now I'm just going to adjust. As I go through my thing, I'm going to just adjust everything.
Nothing is ever right to begin with. Well, sometimes it is, but that's a happy accident. You never know. If you look at the head, we went over the proportions. I don't know if you remember that, but her eyes are about right in the middle of the head. So as I look at the entire head, not just the face, but from the cranium where it's hidden by hair all the way to the chin, the eyes are about right in the middle. Her eyes are slightly closed. So I'm just going to do little lines to denote the eyelids. The nose, since we're looking up a little bit, the nose is going to be this nice little shadow. So I'm just going to throw in that little shadow there. Somewhere between the eyes and the chin. Not quite in the middle. A little higher than in the middle. And the mouth is going to be in there too. Once you've established kind of where everything's going to go, then take your pencil and make sure they're all lined up in the right way. The chin should line up with the mouth, should line up with the eyes, okay, or at least be close. Everything gets erased with that we're drawing with our pencil, so don't get attached to your drawing. One of the reasons I leave the drawing of the people to the end is because in your mind it's probably the more complex of things, but it's just the structure. Once you get the structure down, everything else is easier. So there's less line, less things you do in like the human face than you would in, say, a tree or a rock. But the biggest thing when drawing people is that everything kind of has to be in the right place. And you can add whatever little details that you want to add into it. She's got very long hair. It's going way down to the back over here. It's kind of hard to see a little bit, but that's sometimes just want to mark that in there a little bit. Now, technically, what I'm doing here is probably I wouldn't probably end up doing it because I've already put in as much information as I think I need. But you can put in whatever you feel like you need. Some people like to have more information, some people less. There's a spontaneity that comes with less information. So once your structure is down, and keep in the back of your mind that everything gets erased here. Keep it light, keep it soft. Our emphasis area is the face. So we're going to spend a little extra time on the face, make sure it's right. So I'm going to zoom into her face so that we can see a little bit. Half closed eyes can be a little bit of a challenge to do, and I'll show you how to do those. So I'm going to just sketch in the features of the face a little bit more, just because that's important. I always get asked, where do you start? I start with the eye, just because that seems to be an important area there. So I'm going to start with the top eyelid. And also, if you wanted to, you could sketch in like where the eyebrows are. You can sketch those in. And we're not necessarily doing a portrait here, so don't be too concerned if it's not exactly right. So here goes. Got my ink pen here. I'm just going to start out with this upper eyelid, slightly curved. We know it's mostly closed, so I'm just going to kind of little dots and dashes. Here's the corner of the eye. Her iris, you can see just a little bit of the eye right there as it's looking down. So I'm just going to put a little bracket there. I don't see the eye, the pupil, but I know it's going to be in there. So I'll put in a little bit of a little dot there. She's got eyelashes that cover up a lot of this. And so I'm just going to put in a couple little dots and dashes, knowing that that's going to be covered up by eyelashes. Anytime you have wrinkles in the eye, like right under the eye, you'll see a wrinkle. So rather than do a line there, I'm just going to do these little zigzaggy dots and dashes. I'm just going to kind of go in there, barely touching the paper, barely touching. Just some little dots and dashes. Same thing above the eye. I can see her eyelid, just a couple little dots and dashes. Okay, don't do too much. Remember, when in doubt, leave it out. If you think to yourself, I don't really see that very much, then leave it out. I'm going to do some little dots and dashes for her eyebrows, and then I'll go back in and do a couple little lines just to show that there's a little bit of hair in there. So I'm just going to kind of come up here, kind of delineate where it is, little dots and dashes. And then some little hairy lines. Very light, just barely touch your paper. You'll get these really light little edges. And right now you're thinking to yourself, gosh, that looks kind of silly. But as we go, it's going to look better and better. A couple more little dots and dashes and you got it. Here's her eyelashes. Coming out away from the eye just a little bit. Don't do too much. And then I'm just going to do little dots and dashes until it's about what I want it to be. It'll make it look like the eye is half closed or half open. We can always come back in and add some more to this, okay? I'm going to do the other eye pretty much the same way. I'm going to start out with the little eyebrow. There's a little edge that goes up there with the eyebrow. Little hairs. Little dots and dashes. Until it's what I want it, because I can always add more. I'm going to define this side of her head. And when you start out here, don't draw a line and say this is where the hair is. Just start with where your pencil is, and you can mark that with your pencil. And then just bring your pen in there and just do these little edges coming out. This one kind of follows the edge down. Little edge for her eyebrow. A little edge for her cheek. And then I'm just going to end it there because right there, there's like no edge there. It almost blends into the background. There's a little dot there, and I can pick up that chin down in here. There's the neck. Now the nose. The nose can be a very difficult thing. But I'm going to start out with the nostrils. Don't draw an oval for the nostrils. The upper nostril, where the nostril is there, you can put little dots and dashes to just say this is the outside of the nostril. There's the underside of the nostril, and then I've got this little Nike swoosh right there. Dots and dashes. There's a nostril. Dots and dashes. When in doubt, leave it out. Don't do too much. Now there's a little shadow under there, so what I'm going to do, and I'm going to get rid of what I've got there as far as my graphite goes. There is just a little shadow that's under there. You can take your pencil if you want to and just go up and say, okay, I've got to shadow through this much of the nose. After a while, you don't have to draw it. It's just going to be in your mind. There's a little shadow that goes down the philtrum, a little divot under there, and then it goes down the whole side of the cheek. If you want to put that in, you could. But right now, just the nose. So now I'm just going to hatch through that very, very lightly, almost not touching the page. Little dots and dashes. And then I need just a couple little dots and dashes for the tip of the nose. And really, that's about it. There's hardly anything left there. Maybe some dots and dashes just to define some of those edges. Underneath the nose is probably a little darker, so I may go back into that with some dots and dashes in the nostril, underneath the nose where the cast shadow's a little bit darker. Some dots and dashes, and you got it. Same thing with the lips. If you wanted to, you could go in and you can use your pencil very lightly to define the lips, where the lips go, because I don't want to draw a line around my lips. So I can define those little edges where the lips are. Here's underneath the lip. There's a little shadow right there. You can define that out. Now I'm just going to hatch through those. Hatch. And I can, if I wanted to, now define a little edge of the chin. I don't want to do the whole line. So a little bit under the ear over there. I can see where that chin kind of comes down. Maybe a dot. And over here, I'm going to define the rest of it. Because there's a shadow that goes under her chin. And even a shadow down her neck. I can do that whole shadow too. We can always come back into this and add more if we need to. So if you wanted a couple little dots and dashes. Once you get rid of the graphite, though, that's when it really looks much better. Get rid of that graphite, and there we have it. Fairly simple. Now, yes, there are a bunch of things. If you wanted to put in some of those cheekbones and things, we can do that a little bit later. But let's do some hair. So the hair is, just go with your ink pen in the direction that the hair flows. So I'm just going to start out. Let me put her head down here so you can see that. See this? There's a lot of light up in here. All this stuff here, leave it out. Okay, there's really very little line there. So just leave it out. I'm just going to start out with the darkest area here. I'm just going to go in the direction that the hair flows. Here's some line going this way. The hair kind of comes down and then flows out this way. Some of it flows out this way. These are just little feathered lines. Don't draw a line around the edge of the hair. Leave it, just let it go. It will take care of itself. There's some very light little hairs coming out of here. You maybe do a couple little feathered lines out of there, but for the most part, you can just leave a lot of that out. Just a little feathered line here and there. And then where it's darker, just add some more line. Sometimes you may want to, when you're doing hair, you can flip it one way or flip it the other way, because hair doesn't always go in the same exact direction. And just where your hair is darker, you're just going to do more line. Once you get a lot of that hair done too, you want to go back into the face, because you'll say, oh, it's not as dark as I thought it was. But notice how much I left out up there. Like I say, you can always come back in and add more later. That very light hair that's on top, just leave it out. Any of these really light wispy hairs that come off her face, if you want to put some of those in, do, but break them. So what I mean by that is, if I've got a little part that's coming this way, I'm just going to pretend to draw and then pick it up again over here. There's a little light wispy hair. Everybody makes that connection that that's there. You can add those light wispy hairs if you want to. Here's her ear. Ears are another thing that you can kind of simplify a little bit. So rather than drawing lines, just do little shadows in there with little hatched lines, dots and dashes. If you need an edge somewhere, like I didn't draw the edge around the ear, I'm using the hair to define that edge. So you can use that edge of the hair to define those edges. And I'm just trying to go kind of in the direction that her hair looks like it flows. If her hair were dark, you could pretty much scribble through the whole thing. But because she's got a little lighter hair, then you want to leave a lot out. What's important are your edges. So let me get rid of my graphite here. It looks a lot better once the graphite's gone. And those edges of the hair, you know, I mean, if there's some light, soft hair that's kind of flowing out, you can just leave some of these little lines just kind of hanging out there. Everybody understands that it's hair. You don't need to connect everything. And then if there's any darker areas, like this on her cheek, I may want to go through and just do a couple little hatched marks across her cheek, just to give that cheekbone some. I'm going to hatch through a little bit of the chin. Give it some shadow there. Little dots and dashes to make the corners of the mouth a little bit darker. This whole side of the face is in shadow. If you can hatch real fast, that's what I'm going to do, is just hatch through this really fast. For the most part, that head is done. We can come back into it later if we want to, add some more lines and things. But right now, that's about it. Little hatch marks over there. That was a little darker on that eye. Now as we move down the whole torso, the whole body, same thing, just dots and dashes. But since the head is done, you can kind of relax a little bit, and you can really kind of zip through some of this. And it doesn't matter which direction you go. Sometimes I'll go this way, sometimes I'll go this way. If you want it darker, you can kind of hatch through it in different directions. And if you can't see something, don't throw it in. I've got just a couple little edges that are there. I throw those in. Wrinkles can all be done with little hatch marks, almost zigzags. Sometimes you can do like a little edge, like just a couple little lines, and then hatch through them for your fabric. If you want them to look lighter, just keep your lines separated a little bit more. The farther you separate them, the lighter they look. The closer they are, the darker they look. And see, the rest of this is going to go very fast. Just pick out one wrinkle, put that one in. Pick out another wrinkle, put that one in. Until the sleeve is done. And I didn't draw a line around it. I don't need to. Get rid of that graphite. Sometimes, like this bottom of her sleeve is really dark, you can just hatch through it, because you know that it's all going to be dark. And then just keep hatching until you're done. There's a kind of a border that goes up her bodice here. And I'm not really sure what's going on in that. I mean, I guess I could zoom into it, but I know that there's some sort of pattern, but I'm just going to put in little dots and dashes to say, hey, you know what? There's things going on in here, but it's not important what it is. Now just quick dots and dashes to get your structure, whatever it is. Last thing that's really going to give you some worries is those hands. So let me show you how to do hands. Now, her hands are in gloves, so that takes a little bit of pressure off of us. But, again, don't think of fingers, think of shadows. So she's got a little triangular shadow that's right there. I'm just going to throw that little triangular shadow in real quick. Then the top of her hand is almost gone. It's almost missing. I suppose I could put in some little lines there to just say, oh, there's a little shadow right there. Maybe some dots and dashes. Let me zoom into her hand so you see what I'm doing. The tip of the glove, and then there's a little shadow that comes over that. I'm just going to hatch through that. There's the shadow of the glove. And it goes to a little knuckle. Now, the knuckle on the thumb, the first knuckle of the thumb, is going to line up with the knuckles on the fingers. And so if you think to yourself, okay, there's a little knuckle right there, it goes into the palm of the hand, which is covered up. That's the knuckle there. I'm going to go straight down from there, and I'm just going to do this couple little dots and dashes there. And there's a knuckle. The back of the hand, she's got a ring on. So I'm going to throw in that ring real quick. Dots and dashes. Voila, there's a ring. Pretty quick. Because I can't see what's going on in there. I don't know what that pattern is. Doesn't matter. And there's a knuckle there too. So I'm going to follow this knuckle over, do another little bunch of lines. There's another knuckle. Shadow under the other finger, another little kind of a rounded triangular shape. And the bottom one, same thing. Hatch through that whole back of the hand. And there is a hand. There's very little, you don't worry about fingers, just the shadows. Your viewer, your audience will put in that hand. It's all figured out for you. Here's some more shadow underneath the hand. A little more cross hatching if it's darker, which it is. A couple little dots and dashes. And you got it. There's a hand. Piece of cake. Here's the other hand. I'm going to start out with that little rounded shape there. Little rounded shapes there. And then do the same thing. Kind of pick out where's the darkest area. A little shadow right there. And throw that one in. A little shadow around the thumb. Just do the little shadows. Don't worry about if you can see. There's the thumb. It's all done. Piece of cake. Tip of the finger. Here's the little knuckle right there. Little shadow over here. Follow that down. Another finger, knuckle. The fourth finger we can't see. It's all tucked back in there. couple little dots and dashes. Voila, there's a hand. Easiest hand you've ever drawn. Here's some wrinkles up the dress there, the sleeve. Couple little dots. That's it. And the rest of it, just throw it in as fast as you can. I mean, hands and faces, those are done. I haven't drawn a line around anything yet, and look how it's starting to come through. Sometimes you need that, but I'm at the risk of going a little overboard on this. I just want to prove to you that you can do it. Nice drawing without lines around things. Just let them go. Let them do their own thing. There is an art philosophy that says your medium will take care of itself. That whatever its tendencies are will just kind of happen. And your job is to kind of guide them and let them happen. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Haven't really quite decided if that's what I really truly feel. But it's an interesting concept. It does that a lot with things like watercolor paint. But I think with ink, you have to guide it a little bit more. Here's her arm. Not sure what this is either. Some sort of a fabric band. It's got some, looks like Celtic knotwork or something on it. I have no idea. So I'm just going to throw in some darker shapes and pretend that I can see something going on in there. Got a little belt made out of little metal squares. You're going to throw those in. And again, there's a pattern on them. I don't know. I don't see that pattern. So I'm just going to throw it in. Little flowers or something. I'm not sure. Just little dots and dashes. Just scribble them in. Nobody cares. You can see all of that. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe somebody does. Like I say, you can always add as much as you want to this. If you're like me, you say to yourself, I've got an hour or something, I want to draw that much, then that's your time. That's what you got. Draw as much as you can. Push yourself to get as much information as you can in there. Because we could sit there and we could work on this for hours and hours and hours. But it's practice. It's not, unless you're doing it for somebody, you know, it's practice. Make sure you get rid of all the graphite that's on there. We've drawn lightly enough that it should all be able to get rid of that. It should be all gone about now. Thanks for drawing with me today. I hope that this is helping in some way to make your life a little bit better. In my opinion, art makes life better. It sure calms things down sometimes in that hectic world where you got so much going on. And not a lot of pressure here, you know. I think we put the pressure on ourselves because we want it to look good. But nobody else is putting pressure on you here. I'm surely not, because my stuff isn't perfect. But it is fun, and you learn a lot. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been something that you'll be proud to show other people, because art isn't art unless it has an audience. Art requires an audience. It needs people to see it. And I hope you have a lovely day.